The night of no return. It was a night like no other, dark and still, except for the faint whisper of the wind. In the middle of nowhere stood a haunted mansion, abandoned for years, shrouded in mystery and fear. But for four friends seeking adventure, this was the perfect place for a night they'd never forget. Little did they know, once they stepped inside, their lives would change forever. This was no ordinary adventure. This was a night of terror, a night of no return. It was 1996, in a small town in rural America. Four close friends, Jake, Sarah, Ethan, and Rachel, were known for their love of adventure and thrill-seeking. They'd grown up together, always looking for ways to escape the monotony of small-town life. This time, however, their adventure would be unlike any other. Jake was the leader of the group. Athletic, brave, and confident, he was always the one to push boundaries. But deep down, Jake carried a burden, a crippling fear of losing control. He'd never admit it, but the idea of facing something unknown terrified him. Sarah was the brain of the group, always cautious and practical. Her logical thinking kept them out of trouble more than once. But Sarah had a dark past, a fear of the unknown after losing her younger sister under mysterious circumstances. She wanted answers, a way to confront her trauma, and believed the supernatural might hold the key. Ethan was the joker, the guy who always made the group laugh. He wasn't the bravest, but he never took anything seriously, masking his anxiety with humor. His weakness? Fear of isolation. He couldn't stand the thought of being left alone, especially in an eerie place like the haunted mansion. Rachel, soft-spoken but determined, had always been the most sensitive to the supernatural. She was the one who suggested the adventure, secretly hoping to uncover a truth no one else could see. Her connection to the otherworldly was both her strength and her curse. The group had heard stories about the old mansion on the outskirts of town, stories of disappearances, strange noises, and shadows that moved in the night. No one had dared to spend more than a few minutes inside the house. But these four friends wanted to be the first. It was supposed to be fun, just a night of thrills, nothing serious. Or so they thought. The night was cold as they approached the mansion, its towering structure looming in the distance like a dark shadow. The front door creaked open, almost as if it were expecting them. Nervous but excited, they stepped inside, flashlights in hand, illuminating the dust-covered floorboards and broken furniture. Ethan cracked a joke to lighten the mood, but the eerie silence swallowed his laughter. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. Something didn't feel right. As they explored deeper into the house, strange things began to happen. A door that had been shut was now wide open. The sound of faint footsteps echoed through the hallway. Sarah noticed it first, small things out of place, almost as if someone, or something, was watching them. But it was too late to turn back now. Jake, always the fearless leader, urged them to continue. They reached the basement, and that's when things took a dark turn. The temperature dropped suddenly, and their flashlights flickered. They heard whispers, soft, unintelligible voices coming from the shadows. Rachel, now visibly shaken, tried to communicate with the entity, asking if it was there. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with an unnatural energy. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the basement. Panic set in as they realized they were not alone. A shadowy figure appeared at the far end of the room, its eyes glowing in the dark. It moved closer, but not like a person, more like a distortion in the air, twisting and bending reality around it. Sarah, trying to stay calm, whispered, "It's feeding off our fear." We have to stay calm." But it was too late. The entity targeted Ethan first, isolating him from the group. His worst fear, being alone, came true. The others screamed his name, but he was lost in the darkness, his voice echoing from somewhere they couldn't reach. Jake, determined to save his friend, ran toward the figure, but was thrown back by an invisible force. For the first time, he realized he had no control here. His strength meant nothing in the face of this supernatural force. Rachel, realizing the entity had a connection to the house, tried to speak to it again, this time pleading for mercy. She felt the entity's presence grow stronger as if it were drawing power from her. But instead of fighting, she decided to surrender to the feeling, hoping her connection to the supernatural could save them. Meanwhile, Sarah was working furiously to find a way out, using her logical mind to think through the situation. She remembered the stories of the house, how a family had been killed here under mysterious circumstances. The entity was likely the vengeful spirit of one of them, trapped in the house for eternity. Using this knowledge, she convinced Jake to help her find a way to release the spirit. They had to confront their deepest fears to set it free. In a desperate attempt to save Ethan, Rachel stepped forward, offering herself to the entity. As it drew closer, she felt its cold breath on her skin. But instead of fear, she embraced the unknown. With a final plea, she called out to the spirit, telling it that it didn't need to be alone anymore. In a sudden burst of light, the entity vanished. The door to the basement swung open, and Ethan reappeared, shaken but unharmed. They all rushed out of the house, gasping for breath, their hearts racing. They had survived the night, but they knew they would never be the same again. As they drove away, the house loomed behind them, silent and still. None of them spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. They had confronted their worst fears that night and lived to tell the tale. But deep down, they knew something had followed them. The entity wasn't gone, it had just found a new home, inside them.